So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. I know you're joining from different time zones, so a special thank you for those who are very early in the morning or late at night. A very warm welcome from the Global Donor Platform for Rural Development to today's webinar, AI for Healthy Diets, which is part of the series on applying artificial intelligence in agri-food systems. Now, there's been a lot of interest across the donor community and beyond in how AI can help strengthen agri-food systems. But creating a shared dialogue on this topic is not always so straightforward. The applications of AI are actually quite overwhelming. Everybody's using it, I'm sure, either individually in your own work or within your organizations, which is for some years now. Plus, there are always so many different angles to consider. The field is evolving very quickly, so conversations and efforts often happen on separate paths. Here at the Donor Platform, since we care very much about bringing the issue of AI to rural development and agri-food systems, we decided to start with a series of webinars. So short exchanges with a focus lens to illustrate concrete case studies as examples, either for reflection or opportunities to collaborate on. So today's 45-minute session aims to do exactly that. We have a practical example from GAIN, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, around how AI is being used to improve nutrition outcomes. AI is already reshaping food systems and the potential is enormous. So the challenge now is how to turn this potential into practice. From the donor platform side, we are exploring this through a new work stream, which is being generously championed by our board member, Alessandra Roversi, from the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. And she's really playing a key role in helping the platform shape efforts on exploring responsible and equitable AI in agri-food systems, and also on ways to share this back to our community. So on that note, I'm very happy to pass the floor over to Alessandra to help kickstart today's webinar. Thank you so much. Alessandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for this great introduction. Thanks all of you for joining. Very excited to kick off this series, which very purposefully actually is called both AI and data, because these are, of course, two extremely important components. And without good data, transparent data, there's actually no good AI. So this is something that we're going to be looking at into this work stream. So not only the AI. The Swiss Development Cooperation Agency, SDC, like many of other donors, is reflecting internally how to use AI into its operations on a daily basis. But it's also reflecting on what sort of projects with partners it should support and encourage. To do that, we have developed the first artificial aid work paper where we have set up a few guiding principles. And I would like quickly, as an introduction, to share a few of those with you, because I think it's of particular relevance for the donor community to reflect also what sort of AI we want to implement both internally in our operation, but also externally in our programmatic and policy dialogue support. We have a number of rules, and one of those is, of course, as a first rule is the do no harm rule, which we are applying in all of our projects. Then that humans should be in control. And make decision-making processes. Then we're very keen to work on the whole participation and inclusion, where we develop AI tool and solutions that actually always think about including AI literacy to make sure that the communities that may be involved also get involved in each stage of the process and not just at the recipient end. We're very keen in a later stage to also look at how we can localize AI and make sure that it's not only provided by large companies, global companies, but it's actually how can this be used at, and that the power can be held by the people, giving them agency and empowering them to also act on the data that they provide and how it's being used in the various AI tools. We also need to work particularly strongly in our field on debunking and debiasing the bias and the data sets. because we have both at the data collection level to the deployment of our tools, algorithm, as we all know, are never neutral, and AI-driven process are also not neutral. Then we need to look, of course, into the data integrity. Data for us is a key cornerstone, high quality data sets, and Switzerland has set itself very strongly on this. Recently in Geneva, and I hope some of you were connected, we had the AI for Good Summit, but also the first ever UN dialogue on AI governance, which was a moment to reflect on how data and needs to be licensed and ethically sourced, and really with clear defined origin of the data, where consent of the legislation and is really clear. We also need to look at things which most people know, of course, climate impact of the use of AI, but also decent work, that they cannot be AI exploitative supply chains, and really fair work practice in this field, as well, as much as we're looking at these dimensions into our other programmatic elements. And finally, of course, transparency and algorithmic audit. In a sense, we need to make sure that we have the clear oversight and accountability. So all of these are going to be a bit of the paramount elements that we use at the SDC. We would like to share with others, learn from others, and make sure that we're all joining this conversation. And I'm extremely pleased since my team is the health and food team, and at the heart of this, nutrition is a core element. I'm extremely pleased and honored to introduce Beal, Senior Technical Specialist and Global Nutrition Scientist from GAIN, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, and Mduduzi Mbuya, who's Director Knowledge Leadership at GAIN as well, to discuss with us the implication for donors. But actually, I think it's a broader conversation. It's relevant for everyone on the call, not only if you're a donor. And I'm going to kick in with a question which is going to lead into a presentation. So why and what was the motivation, Tai, when you started at GAIN to develop an AI strategy? I guess, of course, it's in the air and time of the moment, but what have you learned since you kicked that strategy, and how did you start on that journey? So thanks a lot for joining us and sharing some of your thoughts.
Thank you, Alessandra. And I'm going to share a few slides with you all to sort of answer that question. So we put together a strategy with some funding from the Gates Foundation to really be able to kickstart the use of AI in our programs. And we have, we had wanted to do this kind of formally for since we sort of saw the power of AI a few years ago. We finally got the funding to do that. So I'm going to talk about this pretty quickly because we want to leave room for some Q&As. But we're very happy to follow up, and even if we don't have time on this call today, to have further discussion. So why AI and why now? We have this huge challenge in the food systems world, or the new global nutrition world, where we have billions of people who are not able to afford healthy diets, who are malnourished, and we have food systems that are often not transforming on pace with global development goals. And so we often hit the same challenge again and again. We don't have enough data. We have disjointed data, scarce data is not complete. We have data missing across the food system. Hard to reach populations is a big one. We know the people who need it most often are the hardest to reach. Complex supply chains, compliance checks, etc. Now, this data was from about 9 months ago when I looked into this. So 78% of organizations were using AI in at least one business function. I assume that's higher now, probably most organizations. It's been rapidly increasing, of course, and I think everyone's trying to figure out, how do we make the best use of this and how do we do it safely? And so really we're trying to capitalize on this and make sure that we can have an impact on nutrition in a positive way and not create further divide between the rich and the poor and other people who are disadvantaged and not accessible, for example. So we are thinking of AI in this context, not just in terms of, do we use AI in our current roles and operations? Do we use it to help copy edit our text and as a thinking partner? But we're really thinking in integrating into the programmatic work area. How do we really tap into AI in a strategic way? And so we're really guided by this process of thinking of AI really as a strategic enabler not as a black box, although I think there are use cases where sometimes we can use AI as a black box if we're just interested in the output itself. But in general, we're thinking of this as supporting really problem-driven efforts. So we have problems that we're trying to address, and these are focused on humans, people that we are trying to reach, and it's not for technology's sake. And lastly, making sure that this is equitable. It's very easy to reach those who have access to technology and the internet and digital tools. And so this becomes a bigger challenge when we think about how do we reach those who often our target population we're trying to reach, and the donors, of course, we're trying to reach. So when we were putting this together, we discussed we're developing our next strategy for the next 5 years. We were reviewing our current strategy in terms of our general overview, and so we wanted to add an AI focus piece of this, is what we put out, and we'll put in links hopefully in the chat so you can check out some of these resources like the strategy itself. But we're trying to do this across the program lifecycle, where we influence our design, the delivery, and the scale. And we've been doing this through these ideas. We've sort of categorized this into 3 categories where we say we have a need to innovate because we're addressing really complex problems. So when we're thinking about how to do that, how can we use AI to help generate new ideas and new models that can address problems in ways that we haven't thought of before? And the other way is through sort of reinventing. So we have the same goal, but we are really looking for new designs that can help improve the effectiveness, the relevance, potentially the targeting. And then the third one is through optimizing. So it's the same design, but it's a smarter implementation and really making things run in a way that is taking advantage of automation, predictions, et cetera. And these often overlap. So it's not that any of these are just very distinct always, but there's oftentimes carry over into multiple categories. So when we've been thinking about this, we really wanted to be strategic about focusing on areas where we can add value. We have a particular something to offer that is meeting an unmet need, has high potential for impact, and is feasible. And so we've sort of developed a matrix to look at different options for what we're doing. And so we've sort of proposed this, and I think many of these are relevant outside of GAIN or outside of even the field of nutrition specifically, but these sort of one area is these chatbots where they're through platforms that people already use, like WhatsApp. So for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, there are ways to make advice and training accessible through those types of platforms. Generative AI for formative research, predictive analytics. I won't go through everything. On the program specific, we have a lot of ideas that we've specifically targeted for high impact, feasibility, relevance, all of that, specifically for the quality assurance and control and compliance with fortifications. So examples could be computer vision for iron spot test or risk-based monitoring. And then we have a variety of different ones. I won't go into each of these because we have limited time here, but we're really trying to say, like, what are the spaces that we know AI can be very useful, but others are already kind of playing a role there. So we don't need to invest ourselves necessarily if we're going to pursue some of these spaces like commercial spaces or custom builds. We can partner with those who are already doing that well, and we don't need to kind of pursue every area equally. And so what will it take to do this? Well, we have been trying to increase our own staff capacity with trainings, internal trainings, so getting people up to speed, doing some pilot testing. We've had a couple of working groups that we're continuing to support our efforts, and we have the whole idea is to have really some central AI expertise, standards, ethical guardrails, and then have sort of champions and focal points across the organization. So we've been working to build that, and we're hoping to have more expertise in-house to help support that process. We really see the value in partnerships. One of the things we did as part of this work is to partner with the Gates Foundation to do a workshop, and we did interviews with 30 key informants. We have a preprint that we can share in the chat as well, where we are showing some of the results and the findings from those. We really tried to bring together the people from these 2 different areas, these sectors of the global nutrition space, the food system space, people implementing global programs like that, and the AI experts themselves. And we found some folks who have expertise in both and are already working in both, but most of the people were operating in these different worlds, and we brought them together. So we have we see the value because we can't really accomplish AI integration into nutrition programming without bringing these partners together to make sure that we have all of the expertise aligned. And then doing this responsibly requires guidelines and appropriate frameworks. We've been building off of the UNESCO and WHO standards, which have which were already out before we put art together. But we have been making sure we're safeguarding, making sure there's a human in the loop. We have data privacy and sovereignty, ideally open source when possible. And then and then focusing on resourcing. This has been a challenge. We've noticed there's a lot of competition with the funding calls for AI-specific work, and that can come from Google.org and others, where there are thousands of applications for a handful of grants. And so we've sort of been involved in this process and experienced realizing that AI-specific funding is difficult, and I think we're starting to see that more. But we're incorporating AI into our standard program work streams as well, but I think more investment into the AI targeted work can help make this a reality. So I'm going to show a couple of use cases, and I will go through pretty quickly, but I'm going to show two examples of how we've implemented AI into programs. So the first is with a policy chatbot in Bangladesh. We've seen a challenge where it's difficult for stakeholders in countries who are making decisions, not just policymakers, but other decisions, to understand what are the latest policies, what do they mean, how do you find them, how do you access them. And so we put together sort of a curated data set with all of the policy documents that were vetted, that we knew were up to date and really central to key decision-making within food systems. And we put those together to make it accessible. And we probably have used this before. In a general sense, you can upload a document, or you can review multiple documents, or do a search with AI and get some sort of general language summary, and it can help you kind of summarize. But there's a lot of risk there for what is the data, what's being fed, are there hallucinations, how can you trust it, what are the sources? And so we curated this set. So we make sure that these policy documents were vetted. We essentially put this application together that made it very easy for users to find out an answer to a question they had. So instead of just trying to read through, first of all, you have to find the document, you have to read through the document, you have to locate what it is, and it may not be phrased the way that you think it is. So now we made it easy where people can just enter their question into the chatbot. This was back in the day. I think it was built on GPT. It's 3.5, I think, or 4. And we did have a lot of positive feedback with our pilot, high level of accuracy. People found it easy to use. It met the main goal. There were some limitations with comparing across policies and providing responses that considered all of the policies comprehensively. But we have sort of a use case here where we found if this is useful, it's sort of a simple way to make this accessible, and it can be updated as new information comes along. We also made sure that there were ethics sort of built into it. We had very clear instructions, a user guide, we had terms of service that was built into this so that it was very clear and transparent what this information was, where the data came from, and whatnot. The second use case was a recent effort on a program which was called Vegetables for All in Kenya, where we worked on this food fitty effort to first pinpoint where are the low-income urban consumers who need to have access to more vegetables, who don't have enough access. And most of the data was not at the granular geospatial level to be able to pinpoint those users, those people who needed vegetables most. And so there was no way to really identify, you could guess, or you could just generalize and be inefficient, but we didn't have a specific way to find out those areas because the data was at a higher level of aggregation. You can kind of see that some of the data usually is available for either geographic divisions like administrative areas, or sometimes for more granular spatial data, but not at the level of the neighborhood. So there was a effort here, which is, I think, really fascinating, to use these different data sources together. So combining the satellite imagery, national statistics, and other data points, and really combining them using machine learning predictive analytics with Atlas AI, the partner. And we created really targeted areas where these neighborhoods were most needing vendors and access to vegetables. And so we made this very targeted approach that, as you can see here, enabled us to reach a large number of people who needed it most. So this was fulfilling one of those gaps I highlighted before, where we often have inefficient programs. We don't necessarily have very enough granular data to target those who need the program or the intervention the most. And so this really enabled that. It reached over 3 million people, 1,000 of these food FIDI zones. They were mapped, verified, confirmed. 604 zones across 5 counties, so each zone serves around 5,000 people. And then we had all these shops, these mbogas, geotagged and identified so that we could cover all of the areas, okay? The other thing we did, which we can hopefully put in the chat, is built a whole promotional campaign with AI technology as well. So video campaign and efforts to really highlight the operation. And if that's possible, if we have it in the link, hopefully in the chat, you can see that. But I just wanted to highlight that because these 2 examples they go beyond using AI ourselves, right? Not just using it to brainstorm, for writing, or for even prototyping with our own efforts, like actually partnering with AI expertise to carry out an intervention that couldn't have been done before, or couldn't have been done the way that it would be done most effectively or efficiently. And that's what we're hoping to sort of be able to scale up and help others scale up as well, with your help, of course. So I want to highlight the donors for this. We had a group with our Nourishing Food Pathways with these 6 donors here, which includes the Swiss Development for Cooperation. And so I'm going to pass it back over to Alessandra, and Mdu is going to share a bit about some of these implications for donors.
Thanks a lot, Ty. We're sharing information in the chat. Don't hesitate. We see there's a little glitch in the policy chat bot, but we will definitely share a contextual blog and then try to see why it doesn't work. So very quick question to you to start with, Mdu. Ty was saying it's really difficult to just fund AI per se, right? So what are the entry points you think for donors to plug in most effectively into the what AI can do to transform nutrition specifically, but also, let's say, more generally food systems?
Thank you, Alessandra, and thank you, colleagues who joined the webinar, for your time today. To your question, Alessandra, I would say that there are 3 real entry points for donors to consider and development partners to tap into. The first, which you mentioned in detail in your opening, is the data itself. The second are specific use cases. And the third is capacity and governance inside institutions. So on the data is the one that people often underestimate or don't pay as much attention to. But it's important that we start the conversation when we consider that programs like the demographic and health surveys that have been the backbone of population health data across over 100 countries, that kind of foundational data is under real strain now. And the same is true of emergency response data. Those are key to nutrition and food systems decision making. But there are real opportunities also that are emerging alongside that strain. Tools like the food systems dashboard and other initiatives pulling together data that used to sit in scattered, disconnected sources into something usable. But the lesson either way is that when the underlying data is solid, then AI has something to stand on. So that's one area where donors can plug in. On use cases, I think Ty presented a typology of how AI can add value. And it's important to not to start with, can AI do this? But instead to ask, is this an actual bottleneck that someone's stuck on? So look at where a decision is currently slow, manual, or unreliable, whether it's at the implementation, monitoring, and forecasting processes, and ask whether AI is a realistic fit for closing that gap or addressing that bottleneck before a donor asks which tool to fund. And if you're already backing an AI application, you can run the same check. Can you name the specific bottleneck that it's solving? If not, then it's probably not ready to fund. So donors can invest in use cases directly or challenge grantees to apply that same test. And then concretely on the last point, donors can also back things like shared indicator dictionaries. So different organizations' data mean the same thing. This is something that we're already seeing in the food fortification space and the diet quality discourse, where the same indicator can be operationalized in as many ways as organizations that are measuring it. So harmonizing those indicators and their operationalization would be something that donors can look into. Or looking into connections into government, into systems that governments already use, like the DHIS2, for example, instead of other parallel databases or systems. So this is something that's unglamorous, but this is where value for money really shows up, because these foundations get reused across future projects and not just one initiative. Thanks.
Yeah, Mdu, I think very important point. I note in the chat also, Mark Blackwell has shared some thoughts where basically you need first to identify the problem you want to solve, and then the AI, but not the AI per se, which I think is for donors a really important point. And to that point, data right now needs financing. So things like the demographic health survey and other IPC. There are several data sets that are critical in food systems and nutrition systems that have been impacted by decreased funding. So to your message, part of it is funding data and then identifying which problem, as you were giving as an example, how can we connect the mamambogas, so the street vendors, to their customers. So I think it's critical to not go from the solutions or like the potential part of the solution AI, but going into the critical problem we're trying to address. Do you have a specific we're here in the donor platform. So how do you think, what should the next move be? I mean, as you were saying, it's all moving very fast, but how can we probably better coordinate our actions around nutrition and agri-food systems? It's a bit scattered now. We're all going in many directions. Would you have another recommendation for us?
For the donor platform specifically, but also donors more generally, I would say that currently a lot of donor interest in AI right now is exactly that, interest, but not necessarily with a shared way of how to act on it, and how to advance the use of AI, across common problems, across common solutions, and to learn from one use case to the next. So this ends up producing some level of fragmentation, multiple donors and multiple development partners, sometimes in the same country, funding tools that do similar or related things independently, none talking to each other. This is an age-old issue in the development sector, I think. So in our view, in our estimation, the platform is well placed to turn that interest into coordinated action. And in three ways, hopefully I can keep count of the three ways that I'm mentioning. One is convening, so convening donors and development partners around shared priorities so that effort isn't duplicated. It's great that we have this working group and we have this opportunity to share. And this is a good initiative in the sense that convening interested parties who can share experiences. And then latching onto something you mentioned in detail, Alessandra, in your opening, we say responsible AI. We talk about responsibility, we talk about doing no harm, but what that looks like in principle and in practice can be different. So the donor platform probably has a unique opportunity to help set out what responsible actually means in practice. So whether we're talking about data privacy and consent, whether we're talking about checking for bias, whether we're talking about inclusivity and how to avoid a situation where we widen the digital gap and make AI use sort of an opportunity for the privileged few and leave others behind. And also being honest about AI and some tools limits and limitations. That would be helpful in terms of what the platform can help set out so that we don't leave responsible AI as a vague aspiration or a catchy term that we subscribe to. And then last, I think the platform can help in making sure that lessons travel, across the group and across the sector, through something like a community of practice, for example, where donors and development partners have the space to show each other what's working and what isn't, including the messy lessons and not just polished use cases, so that we can learn from successes, build on failures, latch onto opportunities, and everything in between. So to me, that would be the real shift from interest to action, and a space that the donor platform can really tap into, so that we can work towards the same goal, but then also unpack what that goal is and what the different paths to achieving that end is. So those would be my reflection in terms of what the platform can do.
Thanks a lot. Actually, it's a call that I can make already now online. If anyone in this webinar wants to join us in this community of practice, that we can start a little bit rough on the edge today. So just join us, send an email to the GDPRD, the Global Donor Platform for Rural Development. And actually, there is a question that is from Maria Chiara Piedrahita, and I think it's interesting. Maybe it's something that you can give a few insights, Tai or Mdu, on how you work with Bangladesh, because she's asking how it would be interesting to understand the uptake by governments and different organizations of those data generated, etc. So do you have a little, maybe even an anecdote of how it worked on for example, the policy chatbot with the Bangladeshi government? Is there something you can say, or maybe of other experiences you might have had with other governments that GAIN has exchanged with on the topic of AI? Is there a particular example you can give on how governments are actually adopting or actually uptaking the elements you've been sharing?
Thank you, Alessandra. I asked Tai to come in. I think the food systems dashboard might be a good illustration of this issue, because in terms of long-standing discussions with governments and engagement with the use of data for sort of diagnostic and analytic purposes, that would be a good.
Yeah, I can just briefly say I answered in the chat on the Bangladesh policy chatbot, but essentially this was built with the users in mind, which is policymakers in the country, but also other actors who make decisions and need that information. So it was tailored. The results I showed were from the feedback from those. I don't know the formal. I don't think there was a formal evaluation because of the budget constraints. But yeah, it was used, and it currently is being used from our understanding. In terms of the influence of using data to help guide policies and decisions in countries, that is what the food systems dashboard and our global sort of food systems countdown initiative are doing right now. So we've been working for years to compile data to track food systems transformation, to monitor food systems from production to consumption all the way across. And we have been asked specifically by countries to say, how do we apply this in our own frameworks? How do we understand and use this data? How can we build data that's more granular and useful to us at the subnational level? And so we've had 16 countries now where the team has gone to the country involved our country offices where relevant or other partners like UN agencies like the Food and Agriculture Organization. And we've had these workshops where we've had a conversation and really explained the framework, the data that's out there, helped set up new dashboards. So we have dashboards under development, and we have been working at this process of now about to be released in the next couple weeks, a country profile system where it tells you what is the performance of these different indicators that we are important to track. Where are they headed? What direction are they in? Where are the warning signs? Where are the issues that are big challenges? What is going well? And we are now, the next phase of that is more tailored guidance around what are the policies and actions that need to be done to address those issues in countries. So we're working on that now.
Thanks a lot. We have a little live poll as well for the participants. I see there's also a few questions coming to us. There's one from Esther on how can we drive agri-food systems to give them healthier diet access without increasing the inequalities that anyway exist already, and particularly with communities with limited digital access. And I think in between, we can actually have the live poll, which is actually for you, dear participants, at what stage is your organization in applying AI, particularly with the focus on this nutrition and healthy diets. My first answer to Esther is also, we will look into the next webinar, little webinars, we will look into agriculture as well. But for now, it's more into the nutrition healthy diet, let's say food systems. Are you exploring? Are you piloting already, or are you already at scaling? So you can share your answers in the poll 01. And maybe as people, while people answer, if either Mdu or Tai, you can answer how you look at this inequality angle to make sure that people with limited digital access are not cut out of these developments.
Mm-hmm. I can take a stab at that first if you want. So we've had this discussion because it's a challenge not just with AI, it's digital access in general, it's technology. And one of the things that we realize is that by using tools like WhatsApp, it can make it accessible to people. So that was with medium, micro, small, medium-sized enterprises, but we want to make this more broadly across different categories. But that was one that the stakeholder group and that came up in the interviews as this is actually a really accessible way. The company holders were asking for that information and that support. We also have a new proposal in where we specifically, is what I think the funders can do, which I see the Gates Foundation doing and help supporting, is that they are specifically funding work for underserved populations to help get languages that are not included and documented in normal large tools out there. And so we put in a response to one of these calls recently that was building on this Food Fitty work, where we said we have this need to reach populations that aren't messaging, campaigns, all this type of stuff is not reaching them. And so we put in a proposal to build the database for that to help enable that, and then also the tools that we can actually make use of that. So I think there are ways to do it. You have to be really strategic, but the donors can help say, we're going to be funding companies that, organizations or projects that are doing this specifically.
Absolutely. And as you say, this is not just an AI question, it's all sorts of digital access into the agri-food systems. We're close to the end of this webinar. If Michelle or someone from GDPRD can show us the answer to the questions. I see most of the people online are exploring. We have some people already piloting and some people already scaling. If some of them wants to share some questions or some ideas already in the chat, or join our nascent community of practice, that would be really great. For the last few minutes, so as mentioned, this is only the first one of a series of ideas that we're going to be exploring. We'll also work on presenting to you the next time something related more to data collection, also with satellites, and again, it's a bridge to the digital world and AI, with also the Rockefeller Foundation and NASA Harvest. Dates will be soon coming to you, probably in a few weeks or months. And I think I just want to ask to close this question. Can you give us, Mdu or Tai, both of you, 3 actionable takeaways, what we should do absolutely now, what we should do differently, and what we can do together?
Thanks, Alessandra. I can take that on. And this message would apply to donors and development partners alike. So if I had to leave you with 3 things focused on those categories in terms of doing now, I think what we can leave the room and start doing if we aren't exactly is ask ourselves honestly whether AI is the right tool for the bottlenecks, specifically for the bottlenecks that you're already trying to solve. And if you're already funding or implementing an AI application or wanting to roll that out, apply the same test. I think the Tai presented a good schematic that we can find in either the strategy or the preprint in terms of what AI, where AI can add value and where it can't. In terms of what we can do differently, treat data quality governance and local capacity as good practice. This is worth doing regardless of AI, but I don't think that we're doing it in a uniform way. Do that well, and you're already AI ready when the right use case comes along. And then in terms of what we can do together, I think it's important that we agree not just on what we're measuring, but how, plug into the same systems so that we don't duplicate efforts or create parallel approaches, and show each other what's actually working so that the next donor or the next partner doesn't start from zero. And the last, that last point in terms of what we can do together, I think it's definitely collaborate. Thank you. I think that's
Thanks,
where
thanks a lot. And I'm very much looking forward to this. If there's any more questions that we didn't answer, or please use the Q&A box as mentioned in the chat. Otherwise, I hope these little pills of information give you an opportunity to connect to us, to other donors, but also to all the community and stakeholders that are engaged, NGOs, civil society, academia, a lot of people working on this topic. And again, thank you so much to the GDPRD for organizing, to both Tai and Du and the whole GAIN team. And very much looking forward to connecting with you again in a few weeks on other topics. Thanks for sharing your insights and your ideas, and to be provocative. There's really a great opportunity to make good use of data and AI in the context of transforming food systems. And I think it's better if we're together to navigate the pitfalls which we all see in terms of equity and transparency. So really thanks to all of you for contributing.
Thank you, and thank you for all who attended.
Thanks all.